related to schizophrenia.
I have been using cannabis almost daily for the last 30 years.
If it had no side effects and it had no harmful effects, we wouldn't have been sitting here.
If cannabis was going to cause me brain damage, I really don't think that from a personal point of view that I would be sitting here today.
The fact is that you cannot just do what you want.
Watch Newsroom with me, Evan Janssen, weekdays at 9 a.m. on the SABC News channel.
21 Icons is a unique visual journey of some of South Africa's greatest citizens.
When I wake up in the morning, I've got a challenge.
You succeeded in getting me to do something which is absolutely against my nature.
If I do something, I do something properly.
In celebration to 20 years of democracy, the newly released book 21 Icons offers exclusive access to a remarkable spread of South African legends.
It tells their personal stories and unique portraits that reflect our country and, above all, its people.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. I'm Evan Janssen. The show, of course, broadcasts live every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Highlights are repeated at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following morning. We're also streaming live on YouTube between 9 and 10 a.m. every day with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. Now, today, we look at what you need to do not to fall victim to banking scams this holiday. Then we talk about Proudly South Africa's Buying Back South Africa campaign. We look at the Trade Union Congress that's on in Cape Town and close with a real look at the scourge of child abuse that seems to be on the rise here in this country. But first, let's get the day's news from Katrine Milan.
Well, hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Katrine Milan, and let's just take a look at the top stories this morning. We start in the United States. Thousands of protesters shouted at police and clogged the streets of Manhattan, angered by a New York City grand jury's decision not to charge a white police officer in the chokehold death of an unarmed black man. In July this year, Eric Garner died shortly after he was subdued in an illegal chokehold when he refused to be handcuffed by police. He was charged for allegedly selling single cigarettes on the streets. The decision comes a week after racial tensions flared up in Ferguson, Missouri, after a decision not to indict police officer Darren Wilson in the shooting dead of black teenager Michael Brown. Moving to China, efforts to create jobs, fight poverty and end inequality will dominate talks between President Jacob Zuma and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping today. President Zuma is in Beijing on a 2-day state visit. Later today, President Zuma will be afforded the official state visit welcome by President Xi Jinping. Here they are expected to review progress on cooperation and infrastructure development.
It means there'll be more exports from South Africa to China. There'll be more investment from China to South Africa, meaning that unemployment will be reduced, inequality will be exceedingly reduced as well, in order to ensure that poverty can be eliminated in our country.
And back in South Africa, Western Cape police say they are viewing video footage of officers allegedly assaulting an elderly woman outside her home in Kraaifontein near Cape Town. The 50-year-old victim, Rosalina Paulus, says she tried to intervene after police officers slapped her daughter outside her home. Paulus says her daughter had gone out to try and stop the police from hitting another woman in the street. The video showing the grandmother being assaulted has been viewed more than 14,000 times on YouTube. Police have called on residents of Klipspruit in Soweto not to confront a convicted killer and serial rapist who escaped from court on Tuesday. Lungisani Mdlolo was due to be sentenced for murder, 3 rapes, 5 armed robberies, 10 house break-ins and possession of an unlicensed firearm. However, he escaped before his appearance in the High Court sitting in Palm Ridge. Gauteng police are investigating whether one of their own assisted Mdlolo to escape from the court's holding cells. Eskom has urged South Africans to brace themselves for rolling blackouts today and possibly at the weekend. It has been battling with increased demand, partly due to problems at the Majuba power station in Mpumalanga. Meanwhile, the power utility says it expects Unit 6 of the Majuba power station to come online soon. And Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe has said his Vice President Joyce Mujuru is not qualified to take over the presidency, citing her involvement in an alleged coup plot to kill him. His remarks come as the veteran ruler prepares to select his top party leadership and tighten his grip on power at a Congress which began Tuesday. Mujuru, who was once Mugabe's apparent successor, was not present at the Congress for the second day in a row following weeks of corruption and coup claims in the state media. Now remember, all those top stories and more are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, over to you.
Thank you. Now, 1 in 5 South African online bankers have been victims of fraud, and 62% of them have been targeted by cyber criminals at some point over the past 2 years. South Africa also sits in 3rd place when it comes to leading cybercrime hotspots on the planet. Now, as the holiday shopping season is here, we are joined today in Cape Town by Johan Dekker, who's the COO of the secure online paying service PayU, who talks to us about what you can do to not fall victim to internet scams. Very good morning to you, Mr. Dekker. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning to your viewers out there. I appreciate the opportunity to educate the viewers out there in South Africa related to cybercrime and how they can stay safe over this holiday season.
Firstly, so I want to ask you, it's worrying to see that we rank 3rd globally as a cybercrime hotspots. Can you sort of put us into the picture why that is?
I think, there's a couple of factors that are contributing to us being number 3, Russia and China. I think if you look at it, we've got a very young internet population. A lot of people in the last couple of years have come online using mobile devices and tablets to access social networks. So we've seen a strong drive of usage in social networks like Twitter and Facebook, apps, WhatsApp, WeChat, and so forth. And I think it's a lot about educating these users that what to do online and to be safe. I think it's not a difficult type of items they need to do to ensure that they're safe, and we can go through that.
Now, just before we get into that, tell us a little bit about this report, the Norton Cyber Crimes Report, the Columbus findings. What did the survey find?
So it's in the 4th year that the reports come out. They typically survey about 13,000 people. So it's quite an extensive report. It's the findings. I think we can tackle on 4 fronts. The first is a global view. Daily, about 1 million users get hit by cybercrime or impacted. We're looking at in excess of $100 billion a year in terms of cybercrime. And if you look at it, 66% of millennials versus 54% of baby boomers gets impacted. This just speaks again to the social networking presence of these users and how they relate to mobile phones. If we look at the mobile phone users, what's interesting that most users report that they mobile phones through the night is an arm reach of them, 1 and 2, where only 1 and 2 of these users make use of any security features on their phones in terms of password protecting access to their phone or installing any security software. This is quite alarming. Coupled with the rate that about 37% of these users, adult users, reported their phones to be stolen, giving access to quite sensitive data that users normally have on their phones.
Now, it's festive season and shopping time, and people have got a little bit of extra money to spend, but it's also a time when fraudsters are looking to up their game. What advice would you give to consumers out there, to the man in the street, in protecting themselves against this?
Yeah, it's quite a worrying trend. Now, we've even seen the sophistication of these fraudsters increasing, where previously they would have made use of typical smash and grab type tactics, come in and steal as much as they can. These days, they are patient. They would set up the attack way in advance, infiltrating network or PCs of users or mobile devices. And then in times like this, when users' attention is distracted, they would activate the programs or start to attack, start the attacks also on the e-commerce sites when the e-commerce sites are busy. So I think from a user's perspective, to safeguard themselves online and on the mobile devices is first and foremost look at your device. Is it a device you can trust? So if it's not a trusted device, not your own device, then don't store sensitive data or do sensitive like banking transactions on the device. If it's your own device, ensure that you've got a password protected, ensure you've got security software installed, and keep the device close to you. Secondly, if you look at passwords, a lot of the users' passwords are still 123, which is an easy pickings for fraudsters. Use strong passwords. Strong password, typically a password where you would make use of a combination of uppercase, lowercase, alphanumeric characters, and even special characters to protect yourself. There's also then how you interact with other people. What data do you share with whom? Ensure that the sites that you access are secure. Most sites that are secure will also have to be security protected. Look for at the top in the URL HTTPS protected. Then similar in terms of emails that you receive or links. Don't click on links on sites. Rather, type in the site and visit the site yourself so you don't end up on a site that's been subject to phishing and your data gets phished by the fraudsters. So I think there's a lot of very easy steps a user can take to ensure that they're protected while they're online.
Now, once you fall victim to this kind of crime, what can you do and where should you go for help?
I think the first thing to do if you fall victim to crime, and cybercrime spans quite a wide variety of crimes, is contact the merchant, the trusted merchant, and see how you can deal with that merchant. If the merchant or the site that you're dealing with is not trustworthy and you've suffered fraud, transactional fraud, contact your financial institution. They've got excellent helplines that can assist you in resolving the crime and assist you with contacting the police and registering a case with the police. Last step is you can go to insurer. I think also a lot of users need to understand that when they use their credit or debit cards online, they're entitled to a chargeback, basically contacting the financial institution and asking them to process a chargeback where they were subject to a fraudulent transaction.
When we talk about cybercrime, can you maybe point out what are the things that people should be on the lookout for, and what would be suspicious behavior on behalf of people you interact with online?
So I think there's a couple of types of cybercrime, how the criminals try to get hold of sensitive information. The one is social networking related cybercrime, where people tend to make friends on social networks they don't know. From the Norton report, around 32% of the users said they're making friends with unknown entities to them. And in that case, I would suggest that users only make friends with whom they're familiar with. That's one way to protect them against social cybercrime. I've addressed in terms of the point related to password protection, how to ensure that you password protected. I think users can also look at many ways to protect themselves in terms of devices, what they install in the devices, not to be subject to cybercrime. A good mechanism to secure transacting online is safe is to enable through their financial institution mobile notifications, where you are notified of all your transactions, monitor those transactions, monitor your statements that you get from your banks to ensure there's no suspicious behavior. And if you pick up any suspicious behavior, report that to your financial institution.
What is the most common mistake you think that consumers make when they do business online?
I think the most common mistake is that they end up on the wrong sites, that they buy from the wrong merchants or people. I think they need to be very careful to only go to trusted sites. I think that's a very good starting point.
Mr. Dekker, thank you very much for joining us today. That's the COO of secure online paying service PayU. He says you have to make sure that you buy from reputable online sites. You've got to have a very good password, not just lowercase or 1, 2, 3, 4. And make sure that the people that befriend you on Facebook and other social sites, that you actually know them. We all make that mistake. I think everybody wants to have as many friends because it's become something that we boast about these days. Now, we move on, but we stay within the same vein. You're still considering what gifts to spoil your loved ones with this festive season? Well, Proudly South Africa is calling on all consumers, especially over the festive season, to increase their uptake of locally produced products and to buy back South Africa. Now, Proudly South African has embarked on a roadshow across the country with the aim of stimulating the local economy and contributing towards job creation and economic growth. And today, well, we are joined by Proudly South Africa CEO advocate Leslie Sediba. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thanks for the opportunity.
It's quite interesting to hear that people are not buying local products here in South Africa, or not buying the amount of local products that we should. Why is that? Is it an internet thing?
Well, I think we need to recognize that South Africans for many years under apartheid we were isolated from the rest of the world. Come 1994, we opened our borders. We became part of globalization. And South Africans are spoiled for choice. There's been a massive influx of products that come from other countries. But the reality of where we are 20 years into our democracy, when we look at our trade deficit account, the reality and the picture that emerges is that South Africans are indeed buying more imported goods than they are buying South African goods, which probably suggests that as South Africans, particularly as manufacturers and wholesalers, that we need to offer a much stronger and compelling value proposition to the South African consumer who is pressed. I mean, we live in economically depressed times. There's this corridor and unventilated tunnel of poverty and unemployment that is very pervasive in our society today. So when people go to the shops, generally, it's about what's in it for me as a consumer and what's the value proposition. And I think what it requires of us as South Africans is to build a certain level of consciousness. And one of the key messages that we send out to South Africans is that every time you buy a product, you are effectively creating a job where that product was made. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. So if South Africans are concerned about the unemployment figures, then South Africans need to look at their own procurement and what we buy on a daily basis. Because we believe that if we buy South African products, we will be able to stimulate the economy. And the more the economy gets stimulated, the more money gets circulates in the economy, the more investments happen in the economy, and the more we are able to create jobs.
It sounds, the theory sounds very sound, but is there a scenario where, South Africans in general, we love quality products? South Africans from all walks of life will wear the expensive shoes, the nice belts, the sunglasses, and so forth. Is there a sense amongst South Africans that we don't trust the quality of our products locally, or is it a fact that in the media we are obsessed with international brands?
Well, I think there's an obsession with international brands. There's a perception that international brands offer better quality. If you look at a country which everybody talks about, China, in my view, China has two production lines. China produces quality goods, your iPhones, your iPads, made in China, designed in California, made in China, quality products. But equally, China makes they make cheap goods. And I think, and not just China, other countries as well. And when you look at the whole production and value chain, I mean, if you take an example like, because sometimes we tend to confine this discussion around what we consume, the clothes and the food that we eat. But if you were to take the debate slightly out into a manufacturing space such as windscreen, we have a company like PG Glass. PG Glass makes about 13 kilometers of windscreen every day, and it is quality. Our view is that South African products are actually quality products. There are certain sectors of the economy, purely because of the level of investment that is required to get us the right technology to be able to produce at a certain capacity and a certain level of excellence where we may be challenged. But that is not a situation that applies across all sectors of the economy. One of the key pillars of Proudly South African is that we look at high quality, we look at the fair labor standards, we look at the local content, and on the issue of local content, we say that at least 50% must be local. And in the case of imported material, there must be a substantial transformation. So we are not opposed to issues of imports. What we are opposed to is the importation of finished products. We believe that if you bring in raw material, imported products, I mean, for example, the suit that I'm wearing, it is made from a foreign fabric, but it was made in South Africa. And I think that is the key message, that when you bring in the imported material and you transform it substantially in South Africa, you are able to create jobs. Ultimately, our goal is to talk directly to the issues about employment creation and creating employment opportunities for our people.
Yeah. Tell us about the Buy Back South Africa campaign and how you are engaging and implementing around the country, especially ahead of the festive season.
We are very grateful for the support that we've received from the Department of Trade and Industry, and we want to thank the Minister, Minister Rob Davis, and the team, the DG, Mr. Lionel October, for supporting this. Firstly, it's a partnership with the manufacturing cycle. The manufacturers have been have expressed huge concerns about the poor uptake in South African products. And so we conceived a campaign called Buy Back SA. Effectively, we are saying, if we buy South African goods, we are buying back the future of this country. We are buying back jobs. Because our people need jobs. You're not going to be able to run a stable country, meet the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and the growing inequalities, unless you are able to create employment opportunities for the people in the country. There is nothing about poverty that glorifies God, and I think we want to make that point quite strong. That, you know, and we have statistically a lot of young people that are unemployed. And one of the things that we emphasize as Proudly South African is entrepreneurship. Our people need to be innovative. We need to encourage enterprise development. South African big business need to support the small business sector.
Finally, I want to ask you about the small business ministry that's just been, well, this year been implemented here in South Africa. How is that contributing to local production and helping young, small entrepreneurs?
Well, I think it's the most welcome intervention by the President. There needs to be a specific focus about, because if you look statistically at most leading economies, at least 60% of the jobs that are created in countries like the United States and even in Europe, those jobs come out of small businesses. They are the biggest employment creators. And I think we need to be careful as South Africans that we should do away with a syndrome or a situation where government becomes the biggest employer. That is something that should worry all of us, because ultimately, who is going to create the jobs if government is the biggest creator? And so the intervention to have small business development, I think it's the one that is most welcome. I think we need to give the minister the space to be able to develop the right policy environment and to engage broadly with the industry before we can say, Minister, this is working, this is not working. So I think the Minister, Lindiwe Zulu, is busy with that at the moment, and we are fully supportive as Proud South African of her efforts with her team.
Finally, before I let you go, Mr. Sidibe, just tell the consumers out there, what should we be looking out for when we go to the shops this festive season to buy local?
Well, first of all, we encourage people to look out for the Proudly South African logo. Secondly, we say, by law, every product that is made available for sale, it must indicate the country of origin, the country where that it was. So it will say made in, or a product of South Africa, or a product of Mozambique, or a product of Malawi, or a product of China. Look out for that label. Look out, buy South Africa, buy African products, because the more the money stays in the economy, the more it stays in the country. That is what we need. It's not conclusive, but another strong indication is what is called the 600 barcode. So if you look at the barcode, it will say 600. If it says 600, it's not conclusive, but it's a strong indicator that the product would have been made in South Africa, and that the CGCS, Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, would have issued the barcode for the SADC region for that particular product.
Well, Mr. Sidibe, thank you for joining us today. That's the CEO of Proudly South African, Advocate Leslie Sidibe, joining us today. And it's important. Buy local products. Buy our own. Look at the Proudly South African logo if you don't see it, or 600 on the barcode, and you can, well, create jobs in our very own country. There's the logo you should be looking out for. Thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you, sir.
Now, time for us to have a quick look at your views on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Of course, we love your interaction there. Send us photos. We love those especially. And of course, well, Race issues in America. Anna talks about first Ferguson, now New York. Can we, for 5 seconds, just call this what it is? Black Lives Matter. Yes. Leonard Hadmani says, the most scary thing to realize is how many cases of this type have not been made public through all these years. Yes, that's at the heart of the matter. Johnny Santiago says, according to New York grand jury, it's cigarettes that kill. Well, that chokehold killed that man. He was selling cigarettes to support his family. Can you believe that? New Vision Uganda says, protests erupt in New York after cop not indicted in a chokehold death of Eric Garner. There you see the chokehold that crushed Eric Garner's throat. Scary that this kind of thing still happens in today's world. Let's now take a look at the front pages from elsewhere around the world. Today we start in Australia, where the Daily Telegraph has a full front page picture of Test captain Michael Clarke and the brother of Phil Hughes carrying the late cricketer's coffin at his funeral that took place in Maxwell yesterday. Emotional it was. Then staying in that country, the Australian is also looking at the same story and looks at what Clarke said in his emotional tribute. And then we go to Spain, where papers are looking at the FINA World Championship that's currently taking place in Qatar. Of course, our very own Chad Leclos has taken the event by storm. Now, protests have gripped New York City for the second week in the wake of another grand jury decision not to indict a white police officer for killing an unarmed black male in Staten Island. In July this year, Eric Garner died shortly after he was subdued with an illegal chokehold after refusing to be handcuffed by police on the charge that he was selling single cigarettes on the streets. According to reports, there have been 30 arrests in the city as protesters marched through Manhattan throughout the night. Before we go to an ad break, just a quick look at what's happening across South Africa today and the wider world. Now, in Tongaat, in KwaZulu-Natal, the Commission of Inquiry into the Tongaat Mall collapse continues. Of course, for us golf fans, the Nedbank Golf Challenge will get underway at the Gary Player Country Club at Sun City in the Northwest Province today. On a sporting note as well, the FINA World Swimming Championship continues in Doha, and of course there we'd like to extend our good wishes to Chad Leclos and the rest of the South African team who are really flying the flag in Doha. But we'll be back after a short break. This is Newsroom.
What I'm very grateful about is the fact that I can motivate and I can stimulate young kids that are coming up to say, whatever you want to do is within your reach.
Now I have cancer and now I've survived this terrible, terrible abuse.
I accepted and went to Parliament. I thought it was just going to be for 5 years, but little did I know that 15 years down the line, I'll still be stuck in Parliament.
Join Puleng Molebatsi on Bupilong.
Maar ik is een kapst. Ja, ik de paar bezig. Kom.
Welcome back here with Newsroom on SABC News. More than 2,000 trade union leaders from across the planet are set to arrive in Cape Town for Africa's largest ever international trade union gathering. The theme for the 2014 4th World Congress is Including You, which addresses economic exclusion, income inequality, and the call to action will be workers need a pay rise. Who doesn't? The Congress also coincides with the 20th anniversary of freedom here in South Africa after the fall of apartheid. Now, UNI Global Union General Secretary Philip Jennings joins us from our studio in Cape Town. Very good morning to you, Mr. Jennings. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm proud to be in South Africa these days.
That's wonderful news. Thank you. We were very happy to have you here. But just tell us about UNI Global Union, your role, aims and objectives here in South Africa this week.
We all talk about the global economy. We talk about global business, global finance, global trade, global business. The world needs a global union. My organization brings together over 900 unions from 150 countries from all continents into one organization, UNI Global Union. We're in the services part of the economy, the growing part of the economy, where the future world of work will be. It's important for us to gather, to meet, to make our calls to action. We're here in South Africa to celebrate the 20th anniversary, to look at what's going on here in terms of Africa rising, and to show the world support for the joy we can share with South African people at their own liberation, but also to show that the trade union movement is alive and kicking, and that we need to see the world take a different path from that which we've seen these last decades.
Now, we've had a very difficult year within the trade union movements here in South Africa. We've had strikes that have really crippled the South African economy, especially within the mining industry. Is our labor movement any different from that elsewhere in the world?
Try to keep things in proportion. When you look at the overall strike incidents in South Africa, in terms of the quantity and the length of strikes, you are not first in the league. And in fact, in many respects, you are nowhere near the top of the league. I know strikes are dramatic. They cause interference in day-to-day life. But it's always look at the symptoms and look at the reasons. The South African worker, the African worker, the European, the Latin American, and the Asian worker is facing a fundamental challenge. The wages that they earn don't make ends meet. And what we are seeing during the course of these last decades is that the share of wages in the wealth produced is in decline, here in South Africa and in the United States of America. This is not sustainable, it is not good for our economies, and therefore you will see around the world people taking to streets, 90,000 in the streets of London just a few days ago. 1 million in the streets of Rome, not so long ago. There will be a general strike in Belgium. Why? Because wages aren't making ends meet. We make the economic wheels turn in our nations. And when we don't have rand and euros and dollars in our pocket, then the economic wheels come to a very slow halt.
You talk the call to action. Workers need a pay rise. How do you bring that home to business, big business, multinationals, who seeming to be always at the other end of the scale? And in South Africa, we have the call, people always before profits.
They've forgotten that. In the business community here in South Africa, there's another saying, they want their cake and they're eating it. One of the great disappointments in these first 20 years is that the level of income inequality has actually broadened and lengthened. There is a global phenomenon that the top 1% is taking the majority of the wealth that is created. In the United States, but still the world's largest economy, during the course of the last 20 years, the top 1% of the population, CEOs, business leaders, are taking most of the wealth that is being created. In South Africa, 10% of the people have 50% of the wealth. Now, if this continues, this brings ruptures in society. It threatens your democracy. It threatens a sense of belonging, threatens your communities, threatens your individual sense of well-being. So we're saying to the CEOs and their political friends, this has to stop. And we, as the labour movement, are part of the solution. Minimum wage, living wage, collective bargaining, formalising work. You've got labour brokers running amok in this country with millions of people not sure if they got a job at the end of the day. They're not sure what's in their salary packet by the end of the week. So therefore, the trade union movement is about putting demand back in our economies. And the business leaders should recognise, without demand, there's no business. No business, no investment. No investment, no creativity. And therefore, our call to action is that we once again have to look at the role of wages in turning the economic wheels.
Do we see a future on this planet where workers will increasingly have to take to the streets if business leaders don't play ball?
It's not just me saying this. The World Economic Forum, which based in Europe, the world body, which kind of is a barometer of people's sentiments about business, much more reliable than stock markets, I might add. They conduct a report every year on what risks do they see in the world? What dangers do business people face? And for the last 3 years, the message has been social cohesion.
Yeah.
And when you look at what the people are saying, the people are saying our economies are working for the wealthy. That the wealthy have fixed the political system, that they take care of themselves and not the mass of the population. So we saw the spark of Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah.
Financial crisis not driven by working people. We see sparks of discontent. When we look at the global opinion polls that we do, and we do many, there is this anger emerging that this economy is not working for them and that it's working for that top 1%. Now, this might be seen as being too ideological, but I'm talking about the facts on the ground.
Is it the economy?
This is bad for business.
Is it the economy or is it capitalism that is failing around the world because of the mechanics of the system?
The mechanics of the system. To blame economics in the abstract is one thing. Economic theory can be blamed, which says there's perfect competition, that the economy will come to an equilibrium of full employment and stable prices. Economies are about choice. It's about the people who are in authority to make those choices. Now, if you have a political process which has been bought, which is fixed towards ensuring that the wealthy keep their wealth, that the tax rates are favourable to them, that tax havens are favourable to them, that you can hide and put your profits into other places. This is all about choices. And what we've seen a corruption of economics, we've seen savage capitalism, which has served the few and not the many. And that's why this Congress is so important, because now we put our best minds together to develop an alternative, to show that there are solutions which are sustainable, but it will require a change of behaviour for the people at the top.
Finally, you've got a minute to tell us about trade union recognition around the world, considering that there are countries where workers are not even allowed to be members of a trade union. How do you address that this week?
We are fighting it every single day. You have Massmart and Walmart in this country. Walmart last week had a series of strikes in the United States of America because they would not recognize one person. There is no hiding place for business these days. You may recall the Bangladesh factory collapse and the loss of 1,100 lives last year in Bangladesh. It was us that put together the agreement to rebuild those factories and to put the new health and safety scheme in place for more than 2,000 factories and millions of workers in Bangladesh. We are a global union. We are the global radar for human and trade union rights. We have won great advances for working people, but in a certain business elite, like the Walmarts and others, they cannot see a place for us. And therefore, they use all the tools at their disposal to make sure that we can't get our job done. I've organised 20 million workers In the next decade, we'll organize 20 million more. We stand up against repression. We stand up against the dictators. We stand up against those labor rights which don't give people the right to organize and to negotiate, to have a seat at the table. We were informed by the struggles in this country. And being here on the 20th anniversary is going to give us the energy. It's going to reconnect with the struggle and the sacrifice that the great South African people made. It's an example which inspires us. It illuminates us. And that's why we're here.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we are happy to have you in South Africa. That is the General Secretary of UNI Global Union, Mr. Philip Jennings, joined us live from Cape Town. The message is clear. Big business, you need to share the wealth. If we don't share the wealth, the world will burn. Let's take a look at your views on social media, on some of the stories. It's doing the rounds today at SABC Newsroom, of course, in Zimbabwe, very much. Inka Faz says, so Mugabe wants his wife to be president after him. Yes, it kind of looks like that at the moment. Gushungu says, Zimbabwe does indeed have democratic credentials. Mugabe votes for what he wants and all ZANU-PF scramble to agree with him. As if that Joyce Majura in Zimbabwe is innocent. She has served Mugabe with unquestionable loyalty while innocent people suffered, says Mr. B. Of course, the Congress will go on into the weekend, and we'll only know at the end of it whether Grace Mugabe is the next in line. But let's take a look at what's on our Facebook page now. Of course, it's Newsroom on Facebook. You'll see there today that the Nelson Mandela Foundation Centre of Memory will launch a multimedia tribute exhibition and an online app today in honor of the late former statesman. You can also read more on the protests that have swept across New York City in the wake of a grand jury decision not to indict a white police officer in the death of a black man there. You can also watch the video of a 50-year-old grandmother from Kraaifontein in the Western Cape that's been viewed by more than 13,000 now. The woman has accused police of brutally attacking her and a 17-year-old daughter. All of those stories and a whole lot more on our Newsroom Facebook page. Of course, you can also go to sabc.co.za/news for all the latest updates from all around the world. Now, as we go into the festive season, we want to talk about taxi overloading today. Look at this clip. What is considered a world record to some is an everyday reality within our borders. Overloading. A video posted on YouTube earlier this year, well, it's ahead of the festive season, again being doing the rounds on social media networks like Facebook. The video shows a crowd of people standing in a queue and very politely, without any haste, squeezing into a single minibus taxi. It's unclear how many people managed to get into the vehicle. I counted about 22, but from what we can see, well, you can see with your own eyes, it's quite a record. And this happens every day. It's your responsibility to not get into an overcrowded taxi or any other public transport for that matter, because your life matters at home. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back shortly.
Enjoy your PlayStation 4 games on your smartphone with PS4 Remote Play. Don't settle for good, demand great. The new Sony Xperia Z3 series.
Demand great and get the waterproof Sony Xperia Z3 smartphone with a 20-megapixel camera for only 499 Rand per month on a smart small contract this summer. Power to your best summer in 20 years. Vodacom. Power to you.
I would say there's no supplements or minerals, something that you can take will completely prevent cancer.
Although vitamins help the body produce and use energy, they do not provide energy themselves because they don't contain calories. Supplements also cannot be used to replace foods or make up for poor dietary habits.
Cases in Liberia are currently doubling every 15 to 20 days, and those in Sierra Leone and Guinea are doubling every 30 to 40 days.
Hi, I'm Dr. Silo Matau. Watch Health Talk every Saturday on SABC News.
Well, hello and welcome back. You're with Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just recap the news making headlines this morning. We start in the United States. Thousands of protesters shouted at police and clogged the streets of Manhattan, angered by a New York City grand jury's decision not to charge a white police officer in the chokehold death of an unarmed black man. In July this year, Eric Garner died shortly after he was subdued in an illegal chokehold when he refused to be handcuffed by police. He was charged for allegedly selling single cigarettes on the streets. The decision comes a week after racial tensions flared up in Ferguson, Missouri, after a decision not to indict police officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of black teenager Michael Brown. Back in South Africa, Western Cape police say they are viewing video footage of officers allegedly assaulting an elderly woman outside her home in Kraaifontein near Cape Town. The 50-year-old victim says she tried to intervene after police officers slapped her daughter outside her home. She says her daughter had gone out to try and stop the police from hitting another woman in the street. The video showing the grandmother being assaulted has been viewed more than 15,000 times on YouTube. And then Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe has said his vice president Joyce Mujuru is not qualified to take over the presidency, citing her involvement in an alleged coup plot to kill him. His remarks come as veteran ruler prepares to select his top party leadership and tighten his grip on power at a congress which began on Tuesday. Mujuru, who was once Mugabe's apparent successor, was not present at the congress for the second day in a row, following weeks of corruption and coup claims in the state. Remember, all those top stories and more and all the videos shown throughout the show will be posted on our Facebook page. You can also then follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, over to you.
Thank you once again. The 16 Days of Activism campaign has exposed the horrendous acts perpetrated against women and children. A 10-year-old girl from Emadwaleni at Inchanga, west of Durban, is in a serious but stable condition in hospital. She was stabbed 25 times by a man who visited the little girl's sister, but he didn't find her at home and instead forced the 10-year-old girl to go with him. Another 4-year-old girl was raped at Greytown Hospital in KwaZulu-Natal's Midlands. These attacks come days after the brutal killing of the 3-year-old Jamie Naidu from Chatsworth, south of Durban. She was buried last week. The brutality has raised anger amongst community members. Now, for the latest, we are joined from our Durban studio by Linda Mgobozi. Very good morning, Linda. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Aiden.
Linda, just give us a quick roundup on these cases. Very concerning what's happening in KwaZulu-Natal.
Aiden, if we start with the case of the 10-year little girl from Injanga. It's 12 days now the incident took place. We are told that she was sleeping at home in an outside room at night when the suspect came in and asked for her elder sister. And when he did not find her, kidnapped this little girl. And then the following day, when the parents realized that she was not waking up, they suspected that something was amiss and started looking for her and alerted the community. And she was found in a pool of blood and naked, raped, trying to crawl in a nearby bush. And she was taken to hospital. The latest is the little girl is still in hospital, in ICU, in a ventilator. We are told that she is able to take, to breathe once or twice without being assisted. She is still very critical. We were there yesterday at RK Khan Hospital with the mayor and community members and some politicians. And the mayor actually appealed to all South Africans to pray for this little girl. And more especially that, she cannot talk, and that is also hampering the police investigation, because until she can wake up and say who did this, and the police have got no case, no one has come forward and say I know the suspect, or that is the latest with that 10-year-old.
Tell us about the reaction of the delegation that accompanied the mayor of the eThekwini municipality.
It was NGOs, it was politicians, it was police, because police have got to visit the child and see if she can say something. And before she was taken, and on that morning, she did speak and said if the suspect or perpetrator can come forward, she will be able to identify him. But the people there yesterday, they were very, very angry. They just want the police to arrest the suspect. What makes things even worse is that 5 years ago in that same community, 2 little girls from a primary school were attacked and murdered, raped, and one had her eyes removed. And people are still thinking about that, and they just feel their children are not safe, the women are not safe, and then they want to take the law into their own hands. But the police are also appealing that that should not happen. They must be given an opportunity to do their work.
Linda, thank you for joining us today and giving us an update during the 16 days of activism campaign against no violence against women and children here in South Africa. It's difficult. We're coming to terms with the rapes and murders of young children. It's a really concerning matter. 10-year-old girl stabbed 25 times. Are we losing the plot? Are we going crazy? What do you think? Send us your comments at SABC Newsroom. We'll put them up either on air or on our Facebook page. Here's our final look. Lishan Nareen talks about there goes Bafana Bafana's chance of winning AFCON 2015 Group of Death, but we have faith. SA Cap. It doesn't seem as you have faith, Lishan. Tommy says it's a good thing that Bafana Bafana faces these teams in AFCON 2015 and we will climb the CAF rankings by beating them. Yes, Tommy, that's right. Nabu Zwani says, oh gosh, Group C, it is indeed a group of death. Hashtag CAF. Well, I can tell you, in all the big tournaments, most of the winners of the big tournaments come out of the group of death because you play against the best team and your level is simply a little bit higher for the rest of the tournament. So that's the good news for us. If you play in the group of death, chances are if you win that group, you go on to win the tournament. That's the good news for us. Now, Newsroom, of course, broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a total rebroadcast 5 a.m. the following day. We're also streaming live on YouTube at that time, with our whole show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.